Every author who sets down to write anything has a reason for writing it. They have a message. And the Bible's no different. It has a message. Welcome to the Bible Unbranded. I'm Renee.
And I'm Becky.
We are Old Testament scholars who love talking about this fascinating book, the Bible. And we are inviting you to join us for these conversations. Whether you've never read it or you've been reading it for decades, we hope you'll find a place here with candid conversations about the messy and surprising experience of reading the Bible. In this episode, we are continuing to talk about the Bible through the context of it being a book. So far, we've talked about some of those book things, like it has an author. We've talked about the authorship as it's connected to humans and it's connected to God. Those are in our other episodes. Please go and listen to those if that sounds like something you'd like to know more about our thoughts or how to enter into that conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about this book, which has a message. It's communicating something. Every author who sets down to write anything has a reason for writing it. And they can do all kinds of things, but they have a message. And the Bible's no different. It has a message.
Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons we want to communicate the message, or at least tell you like this main core message to hold on to all the time that you read, is because reading the Bible, especially the Old Testament, is hard. It's really hard. Renee, what's one of the hardest things for you about reading the Bible, Old Testament?
Well, first I just want to acknowledge that one of the things that unites you and I think makes us such good friends and why we are what we are.
I know where you're going.
Is that the fact that it's hard only makes us want to tackle it even more. That's why we're like, oh, here's a thing people don't understand. I'm going to understand it, right? And so hard in this case isn't discouraging to me. It actually draws me into it. But I have always found, and I've heard from my students too, that the first time, especially the first time you read almost any part of the Old Testament, it's super weird. Mm-hmm. It's just weird. It's a completely different cultural context. So they do things and say things that sound weird. It's a different kind of writing. Mm-hmm. The authors, these human authors, are writing in a way that made perfect sense to them and the people they were thinking of as they were writing them in their time and place. But we are thrown off.
Well, they have different worldviews and different values. If you haven't read it and you start to, because we're inviting you to, you're going to read about sacrifices and animals slaughtered.
And sometimes they're going to tell you nothing where you think they should have told you a whole bunch. Uh-huh. So like the style of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So bottom line, it's weird. Mm-hmm. And you have to decide when you're reading it, what am I supposed to understand here? Right.
And when it's weird like that, our brain can go off in all different directions. You know, whether you push in harder because you like a challenge or you back up. But we want to give you kind of an anchor. This book has a message. And the message of every part of the scriptures is to tell you something about God. Mm-hmm. God is revealing his character to us in different ways over and over throughout the scriptures. And in some ways, I think of it as there'll be main characters in the stories, but God is really the main character. There's a main character in this book. Mm-hmm. And the message is about God. Mm-hmm. And he's sharing that message because he wants to be known by his people.
Right. And this is not the only message in the book of the Bible or in individual books of the Bible. Yeah. Like any book, there's all kinds of themes and subplots and little tangents that we go on, but at the end of it all, it's unified, it's drawn together. We call it one book, even though it's like a whole bunch of authors and a whole bunch of books. We can call it one book because the same purpose keeps going throughout the entire thing, and that is God demonstrating his desire to be known, for us to know him.
Yeah. This is probably one of the topics that I feel most passionately about handing to other people. Not only does it anchor them when they read, so they're bringing a constant question, even if they don't find the answer right away to that question. What is this telling me about God? Because sometimes the answer isn't super obvious. But I think it offers a corrective to a lot of the ways that we see Scripture being handled. Like you said, not everybody reads the book this way exactly. Throughout time, people have looked at this book as if it was like a history book, a history of Israel kind of book, which it is. It includes the history of Israel.
And that's part of what that people cherish about it.
Yes.
It's their history. Yeah.
Yes. And people who study history sometimes read this book just because they love ancient history and they're trying to piece it all together. You said something earlier, and I'm trying to remember the word. It was something about it's the tool, or maybe you said the history.
Vehicle.
The history is the vehicle for the message. So the main point of all these pieces that relay the history of Israel is not so that we can take a timeline away and outline the origins of history of Israel and everything. It's the main point is that we be able to see the relational faithfulness of God throughout history. My brain is jumping all over the place, sorry. But one of the things that triggered this for me, understanding this, was when I was talking to friends about, I've known someone for so long, or I've just met someone, this would be Renee, where we've only known each other 6 or 7 years, but it feels like I've known you for my whole life. We can talk about anything. And we call that with somebody, we call that having history with someone. And history is a very relational term, even though we think of it kind of academically. When God is walking with his people, Israel, he's demonstrating himself to them in their situations over and over and over again. And then when he calls the next generation of people, he'll often look back to something he already did to show how faithful he was, that they can trust him. So there's this really strong relational element in history. God is just using these historical narratives to say, this is who I am to you, and this is who you are to me, because he wants to be known and he wants to be trusted and cared for. There's also one other element, and that is that he is, this goes into the whole ancient Near Eastern mindset, but he is declaring himself in control of everything that happens. Even when horrible things happen, this can be kind of hard for us when we read the text, because we'll read something awful like a destruction, or, even we talked about earlier, Pharaoh not releasing the Israelites. It's a big story in Exodus. We'll figure it out if you don't know it. But things don't go that well for Moses at first. And the text will even tell us that that Pharaoh hardens his heart, and it looks like God is hardening Pharaoh's heart. I'm butchering this, Renee.
No, keep going.
Okay. And the text will tell us that God is hardening Pharaoh's heart, and there's lots of conversations about who made the decision? Did God turn it? And it's not trying to tell us about a theology of how God works. It's trying to tell us, look, I'm in control of history. Whatever happens, I can use it for my purpose. No one else is in charge of this thing. So he's saying, here's who I am. I am ultimately in charge, and I am faithful to you. I am good.
That's the flavor of all these character attributes that start to come out of him wanting to be known. So what we want you guys to hear from us is that, kind of as a spoiler alert, right? Like for the rest of this podcast, what you're going to hear us say over and over and over again is that whatever we're reading in one way or another is about God revealing himself to his people. over and over and over again. This is something that we would call a biblical theology.
Yeah.
So, right? So all that means is that the word biblical means it's all of it. So throughout the entirety of this book, the theology, the thing is God. So we're telling you that's who we are. That's who we are as scholars.
That's who we are.
That's as we've studied the text, that's where we've landed, and that's what you're going to hear. And there may be times where you have heard different approaches, because not every scholar or person who's read their Bible all their life, or pastor, not everyone has that same conviction that this is the message. So there may be times that maybe we have a take, we bring a take to this, and you're like, I've heard someone else say something different. It's likely that someone else has a different biblical theology.
Yeah, a different take. Well, my brain keeps running to all of these different places where you can study a narrative in Scripture, and your takeaway, the thing you're trying to figure out, is, how am I supposed to behave? Am I supposed to behave like Moses? Am I supposed to behave like David? Am I supposed to behave like Gideon? And if you don't know any of these characters, that does not disqualify you from this podcast. We will go through them. We love studying them. But there's this concept that somehow when we read the text, it's there's going to be something holy and righteous and saint-like about all these people, and it might give us a clue as to how we're supposed to live.
Yeah, that it would be elevating these examples, these human examples, for emulation. But that's... I mean, we're going to tear that apart, you guys.
We're going to tear it apart.
It's one of the things that gives us the most joy. Why do you think that is?
I like to push back at things, and I remember the day this became clear for me.
Okay.
I remember the text. Not that I figured out that it was about God, but I figured out that it was about God using frail people to do amazing things. And I had been taught that theologically, but then it hadn't, like, the concept was there, was written in my notes, but then it wasn't demonstrated for me by professors when they would explain the text. So there's this story where God calls Abram. He later changes his name to Abraham, so whatever, we'll call him either thing. And Abram has a wife named Sarai, whose name gets changed to Sarah, so we're just going to call him Abraham and Sarah.
Name changes. Here's a weird thing, right? In the Bible.
Oh, weird.
One of those things that we're like, what's going on here? What am I supposed to take away from this? So just a little flag there.
Yeah.
Already.
Yeah. So he promises the two of them, even though they're like 90 some years old, that they're going to have a kid. An offspring, because that's the number one desire, not just because they're like, oh, we want a baby, but that's how you envision having existence. You know, you're going to die, this kind of cultural deep thing that's still in our culture, but really strong in theirs. So anyway, but they're really old. And as soon as they get promised that, they go down into Egypt. And when they go down into Egypt, the text tells us that Sarah was this amazingly beautiful woman. Now, again, she's like 89, 90. So I kind of want to know the beauty secret. Like, I'm not picturing it.
Beautiful and like desirable. Like
sexy.
She's
sexy.
She's hot, you guys.
She's hot.
She's 90. And she's irresistible. Take that, American beauty culture.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And so they come up with this plan to say that Sarah is Abraham's sister. And because they know Pharaoh's going to see her and want her. And he has
You guys, come on.
Yeah. So, and she goes along with it. And so what ends up happening, indeed, he's like, who's that woman? And like, oh, she's my sister. And so he takes her to his harem. The Pharaoh of Egypt is like, ooh, I can have anyone I want, and I want that one. And he puts her in his harem. And you find out he doesn't sleep with her yet because he has lots of other 90-year-olds. Like, I don't know. He's got lots of other women in his harem. But I remember reading that and being like, what is going on here? And I remember my teacher saying, like, well, technically, if you look at the lineage, which is the genealogies that are in there, she really is his half-sister. So they're not really lying because, whoa, God forbid somebody in the Bible would lie, which I hate to rip that Band-Aid off. Happens. And I just remember being like, okay, I guess. And later, reading the scripture, I'm like, no, Abraham was a schmuck. Like, what's he doing to his poor wife? And even God seems to verify that by showing up to Pharaoh in a dream, the text tells us, and God's going to be the one protecting Sarah because Abraham didn't. And God's going to show up to Pharaoh and say, that woman, don't touch her. And Pharaoh goes back to Abraham, and the story goes on, and he's like, why did you tell me this? And they say, well, because we were afraid you were going to take her and kill me, and we didn't want that to happen. And you know, the story ends greatly, or really good. It ends really, really good. They like leave together as a couple without her having to have slept with Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh sends them with tons and tons of riches.
They're rich. They bank.
So it ends really, really good. But even though I was told, whoops, I just touched the mic. Even though I was told that the message is always about God and that he uses broken people, when that part of brokenness showed up in the text, for me, it was explained away as, well, this isn't really a lie and it's really okay.
Right, because Abraham needed to remain elevated.
Yes.
That's that undercurrent that if that's your biblical theology, then you have to
if scripture's about the saints and if scripture's about the story of Israel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have to keep them elevated. And the thing is, that story isn't about Abram directly. That story's about God. And I don't have to look at that and go, how could Abraham do this? Well, because he was scared for his life. Okay, that's fine. The text says that. I don't have to wrestle through, like, how would I be like Abraham? How would I be like Sarah? Who's the good person?
And how can I take this thing that Abraham did? How does that translate to me? Because he did choose to not lie. It gets really complicated.
It gets really complicated. Yeah.
Ties us in knots.
Ties us in knots.
Yeah.
Was he trying to protect God's in knots? And if you step back and go, hold on a minute. I was just going to say Dr. Jossberger. Becky and Renee told us that there is a main message and that the main character is God, and that the main message is God revealing himself, his character, to his people. What did God just show us here? And there's a whole bunch of things, but you don't have to dig. Sometimes you have to dig really deep. Right now, I would say you don't have to dig really deep. He just showed us that not only is he going to keep his promise his way, he's going to use possibly not so desirable people, definitely scared and frail people to do it. And when they get in their own way, Abram and Sarai, he's going to intervene to make it happen the way he needed it to happen. He's going to protect them. He's Sarai's protector in that story. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that every time my husband treats me wrong or I treat him wrong, that God's going to intervene and make sure all goes okay. These aren't the takeaways. The takeaway is that the God who Abram and Sarai served, that gave them a promise, saw that promise through, was faithful even if they weren't saintly, and he's the same God we serve, and we can count on his character. He may choose to do it in a different way. He may choose not to intervene. He may, but the takeaways are about who he is. He wants to be known, and he is 100% committed, at least to that specific, to all the promises he makes, but to that specific promise that he made to Abraham. Nothing's going to get in the way of it.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, this isn't really different, but as often is the case for you and I, like when I come at that, like why does that appeal to me so much?
Yeah.
It's because these characters, Abraham, any of them, any of these, that what we might call, if you went to Sunday school or VBS, the heroes of the faith,
yes,
right?
Thank you.
They, once you realize and you let them be as flawed as the text shows them to be, it takes a whole lot of pressure off of me. Because ultimately, if I'm looking at Moses, I'm looking at David, and I'm wanting to be like them, what's going on underneath is I'm recognizing gosh, God really loved Moses. It says he spoke to him like he no one else,
like a friend.
face to face, like no one else ever has or ever will. Gosh, he loved David. He's a man after his own heart. Man, I want to be loved like that by God. So I need to be a man after his own heart. And I need to be a Moses. I need to be Abraham. But the reality is when you look at it from this direction that we are proposing to you, that we will be arguing for throughout, he's telling us he does. He already does. And the evidence is that he's stuck with Abraham. He's stuck with Moses. He's stuck with each one of these imperfect, unfaithful people because he is faithful. And that's the promise that then I get, right? Rather than the promise of, ooh, if I can just stick it out like one of these guys did, I'm going to be God's guy. I get the promise of, I can't possibly mess up any worse than they did. Look at his unbelievable faithfulness that I get to cling to.
Yeah. You and I are so much alike. Yeah, that drives a lot of what we do when we're reading a text. A lot of what I do. I mean, that's I want to know if I'm going to be good enough, acceptable enough, cared for by. How could I do better? Can I be God's guy kind of thing? Can he love me? And the answer is, yeah, well, if he loved them, clearly he can. What's interesting is that sometimes when we come to a text, we'll come to the text with a question that maybe isn't the right question. They
often spring from these theologies, though, which is kind of why, we want to highlight them, is if we start to identify what we're carrying through.
Yeah. Well, and I know we wanted to talk about this anyway. It's triggered because I remember going to the text with David and being like, how can I be more like David? And I had a PhD at this point, and I was already teaching, and I'd taught through a number of the books where David is one of the main characters. And I was just still digging and trying to find out. And it was because I wanted God to love me like that. And the interesting the thing about the books of like 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles, there's lots of books where David features heavily, is those are some of the books where it gives us very little indication of what behavior of the characters is right or wrong. Yeah. Those are political books. There's a lot of war and kings and it's maneuvering, politicking, murdering. And you just, I couldn't get a feel for what was right or wrong, even just if I looked at the life of David. And it was an example of me coming to a text with my question. And it was a beautiful question. It was a very righteous question. God, how can I be more like David? What did he do that made you love him? Yeah. And the text doesn't really answer my question. Sometimes it doesn't even tell us if God delighted in certain things David did or didn't delight in it. There are a few things David does that are clearly out there, and God says, no, that was disgusting, and you will pay for it with the rest of your life.
And a few things he does where God's like, yes.
And I'm like, what? Why were you allowed to do that?
Right.
But by and large, he just doesn't. The author doesn't give us indication of righteousness or unrighteousness with David's behavior. And what it triggered in me was, I'm asking the wrong questions. And I'm not talking about like, these questions don't have anything to do with the Bible, or I'm talking about, this is a really good question that I brought to the text. Yeah. And the text didn't answer it. And if the Bible's hard enough to read already, because it's just weird, and then you bring a question that seems very Christian, very biblical, very good, like where's the righteousness here? Yeah. To a text, and you don't find an answer, that's really disheartening. You just feel like, how come someone else can take this passage and make a whole sermon out of it, and I look at it and I get nothing. And a lot of times what we will use, the language we will use is, that's because you're asking the wrong question.
Yeah, so just to step back for a second and offer like a really neutral non-emotional example in case this is hard at all for anyone, because it's a personal thing. Our questions are very personal. There are deepest desires a lot of times to know or to be known by God. All these things get wrapped up in it. So I don't ever want us saying, well, that's the wrong question, to be like, ooh, there was something shameful about it. No. It's more like this. If you really, really want to learn how to make a cheesecake, but you open up an atlas and you ask the atlas how to make a cheesecake because you're looking at the map of Philadelphia, it's just the wrong question. You would know that right away because you opened up an atlas. And vice versa. You wouldn't open up a cookbook and ask it to tell you the history of something, right? Because you know when you open up a cookbook, you know what questions you can ask. So when we come to the Bible, understanding this biblical theology, what is the purpose? What is it trying to do? It just sets us up to be able to evaluate our questions and just honestly be able to go, is this something I can expect? I'm not sure yet. Or no, I probably can't. Or it helps us start off on the right foot and be able to adjust as we go along.
Yeah. And I think I heard you say, this is what was anchoring all that. If we hand a question to you to say, somewhere in there you want to know, what is this text telling you about the character of God? That's what God is trying to tell you. That's what I believe he's trying to tell you. Always. Then you have something. Now, can I give an example that I remember figuring out? I love when I have like these really hard things and then I break through to the other side. So there are 3 or 4 chapters that I can think of right now that this question was working for me every time I came to a text all the way through. And then I came to these 3 or 4 chapters and they're at the end of Judges. And they are about behavior. And we won't talk about the story too much, but let me just say, if you want to read the ugliest, darkest behavior you've ever heard of.
If you're a big fan of true crime,
gory, brutal. We're not avoiding talking about it now. No. We'll talk about it, but disgusting true crime. I'll just start with the beginning of the story. So there's this guy, and he has stolen money from his mother. And you're like, okay, so he's the bad guy. You feel bad for the mom. Like, I went through literally looking for a righteous character because that's the only way I knew how to read. There had to be good in here because it was the Bible. And I was looking at characters instead of, hold on, this is about God. And so you think of the mom, and then he confesses to his mom, and his mom is like, oh, I'm so proud of you for confessing to me. And I'm like, good guy, that I'm going to give the money back to you. And I would like you to make an ephod for me. An ephod is something that only the high priests would wear. And they had no right making one or using it. So you're like, wait, the mom's not very good. What's going on? And you just keep going through the story. And then like a priest shows up and you're like, oh, finally there's a priest that's going to show up. And he maybe isn't the high priest, but at least he could be a priest. And then he does something that is very clearly like not what you're supposed to do. This is the benign story, by the way, not the brutal one. This is not the brutal one. Yeah, it's much worse. But even the beginning of the other one, you've got a guy whose wife has left him and you're like, oh, terrible wife. And then he goes off to get her, to bring her back, and he stays with a host, her dad, and her dad's like, no, stay again, and he ends up there forever, which I guess apparently the way I was taught is good hospitality. I have no idea what that's doing in there. And then he goes into he's traveling to go back home with his concubine, and he sees a place he's going to stop, and someone comes and tells him, don't stop here. What?
We've just casually introduced concubines.
Oh. Yeah. So then there's a concubine, which is a second wife that's not really a wife and doesn't have full wife status. How's that one?
Yeah.
And then he doesn't stop in a certain country because it's not Israel and he doesn't want to get slaughtered. So he goes to an Israelite country, and this old man comes up to him and says,
you're going to get slaughtered.
You're going to get slaughtered. Come to my house. And you're like, oh, here's the good guy.
And it just gets worse
it
from
just
there.
gets worse. And
Yeah.
and at the end, and for years, I would read that story and I'd be like, I don't know who the good guy is, which shows you the level of indoctrination that I feel like I was under, because it shouldn't be too hard to see that there is no good guy. There is no good guy. And that's the point of the story. And you're not even going to see hints of like, where did God show up in that particular story?
Right.
Because he doesn't show up. Literally, the story ends with men jumping out of bushes to snatch women for wives. That's how the story ends.
Okay, so do you remember when we started this episode and we said, it's weird? It's like so weird. I don't even know what to do with it. This is like the epitome of it.
The epitome of weird. And so, but it's an example where if you're looking for like, where's the beauty? Where's the, and you're not going to find it. And I have actually had a lot of scholars look at that and say, well, then God's just bad. Because God, he let all this stuff happen. And I don't need to resolve it all here, but the picture there still in bigger context tells us something about God. I'm just going to say this really glibly and tie it up, because he didn't just wipe Israel out right then and there.
Right.
There's a way forward from that. These were God's people. There were times where there was no godliness among the people, but he was faithful to his promise to them. And without a lens that says, I think the people aren't the main point, the story's allowed to be gross because it's about God's interaction and engagement with his creation. And part of that is messy, the creation part. There are some places where the people are beautifully righteous. It's gorgeous. But even then, that's a message about the reflection of God's character.
So I think what I want to do now is kind of sum this up, like wrap all of this up a little bit so that then we can get into the text. Which we really want to do and are excited to do. And that is just this, that we, as readers, you, our listeners, we want you to know that when you read the Bible, you should bring questions. It is expected of you.
Well, that's one of the other things that I wanted to say. The only way you know that a question is the wrong question is to ask it. So ask them. Ask all the questions you want. By wrong question, like you said with shame, it doesn't have anything to do with good or bad. It has to do with, is the text going to answer it? And you won't even know if your question is right or wrong until you ask it.
Right.
And find out whether or not the text is going to answer it.
Yeah. To give another example that I think would be helpful, because we talked about this earlier. I just kind of off the top of my head throughout this question that it's like reading the Chronicles of Narnia and coming to that text and asking, how did the queen make it winter all the time? Like, how did she do that? How did that like work with physics? And what was your response? It was brilliant. Do you remember?
I can't tell you how she did it, but I can just tell you that it symbolized something in the story.
Yeah, that it led, even though that wasn't the right question, it led you as the reader to go, ooh, I don't think it's going to explain this for me, but there's something about winter, and it keeps you engaged. If you've listened to our earlier episodes, you may remember us saying you should expect to be a really active reader. And that's this part of, yes, please, you have to bring your questions. If you don't bring your questions, you're going to rob yourself of really finding the meaning. And then be prepared to let your questions fall away if they turn out to just not be the thing that this author was interested in telling you. Because the author was interested in telling you something, and you'll get there if you keep those questions or keep bringing what's curious in you, and listening well to the author.
Just put a pin in that question though, because this is where we'll say like, oh, wrong question, but we still value the question, and you need to keep a pin in it because something, whether it's something in your life or something in the text, caused you to ask that question. And we have really There are times that I've read a text for years and years and years and been convinced that a question was irrelevant because it wasn't being answered. And then I'm not going into detail on purpose out of discipline, but then I would back up and read that passage in light of like 10 other chapters all in a row and be like, oh, that's the answer to my question. Wow. So hold your question there, but allow the text to shape your questions as you bring them. And the number one thing that is going to help you in our eyes, that we believe is going to drive everything we do when we're reading the text, is remembering that this is a book, and a book has a main character and a message. And with all the messages, the main message is about God and him walking out his journey with his people is a way of him revealing his character over and over. And he'll keep pointing back to how faithful he was and has been. And it's not all history. There's other elements in there too, but it doesn't really matter the element. He's introducing himself because he wants to be known. To me, that's the biggest mystery in Scripture. Okay. All right. We have talked before about wanting to be consistent, about going to a text each time. And the text we thought of is a story in Genesis. And we picked this one with guidance because it's kind of well known. Most of you will have heard of these names or at least be thinking of them.
Yeah, and it kind of has entered into just the cultural vernacular.
And if you don't know it, that's okay too. But it's the story of Cain and Abel from Genesis 4, and it's primarily verses 1 through 15, just so that you can look along or read along if you want. I'm not necessarily going to read it because I think we can synthesize it pretty quickly, and pieces I forget, Renee will help fill in. So it's basically the story of two brothers, Cain and Abel, and they're the children of Adam and Eve, who are the first two humans that God created. So we're at Genesis 4, like we're really, really early in the scriptures. I think, well, a lot of us will be familiar with this story, but there's something that we want to point out about it. And that is the way you read it, the question that's driving your reading may affect the answers you find or don't find. So in this story, these two brothers come and present their sacrifices to God. And I remember it this way. Abel starts with an A, and so he brought animals, and Cain starts with a C, so he brought crops. If there's ever a 50-50 chance, I need something to help me grab onto who was doing what. Abel, I'll get into that part later because it gets distracting. Abel had his sacrifice of animals accepted by God. God looked and went, that was beautiful. I really like that. Thank you. I don't remember his exact words or if it even has them, but it was acceptable. Cain, I don't know what it looked like, but the text tells us that God rejected his offerings and he did not get approval. Again, I have no idea what that looked like, but one was accepted.
It doesn't tell us.
It doesn't tell us. Wrong question. But my brain goes to like, why?
Why? Yeah, everyone who's ever, let's be honest, everyone who's ever read this story in the history of humanity has said, why?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that's why I remember these other little teeny details that may not be that relevant. I remember that the text tells us that Cain brought some of his crops and that Abel brought the firstborn of his animals. So for me, it was always like, oh, maybe it's because you offered the first and the best and there's significance in that. So Abel's heart was right and Cain's wasn't right. And then other scholars will look at that and go, I don't know. The text doesn't explicitly state anywhere.
And we can make conjecture. You'll get to hear this from me a lot. We can write a narrative in there that explains it one way or another, but at the end of the day, it doesn't get us very far.
No. Like, okay, what do I do then? Make sure that I bring God the very first part of the thing that I earned so that it's not the last,
I mean, we'll find out from the story. It doesn't really matter.
And so what ends up happening, I'm going to pause here for just a minute and say that my entire career until 2 years ago was fascinated with why Abel, not Cain. That was it. Like, I didn't know there was more to the story. I've read it 100 times, more than that, in Hebrew. And I didn't think past that part because I got stuck on this unanswerable question. That's a great question. It's just probably the wrong one for this text. And I had a student that came and they were like, I'm going to do my thesis and I want to do it on the story of Cain and Abel. And I was like, great, go for it. And interestingly enough, you've probably heard me talk about it as the story of Cain and Abel since we started. And he came back to me and he said, I don't think this is a story about Cain and Abel. And I was like, what do you mean? Who else could it be about? I taught him the same thing that I've said on this podcast. The message is about God and his character in relationship to us. But my brain didn't make that switch in this passage. And he said, the interaction between Cain and Abel is so small in this story. The biggest speaker, if you go on to read it, the person doing all the talking in this story is God. So what I didn't tell you is that Cain gets jealous and goes and kills Abel.
Takes out the competition.
Weird.
So
I don't know what to... I mean, I can...
And God didn't save Abel.
God didn't save Abel.
Even though his offering was... That's what I meant when I said it doesn't really do him any good.
No, it really doesn't. So, and then the text tells us too, and I think this is so fascinating, this goes all through history, or all through the Old Testament, that the blood of Abel cried out from the ground. One of the characters, since we're talking about characters, we'll talk about this more later in the text, is the ground. Like, we think of only animate human beings as God's, but he's revealing himself to all of creation. We'll talk about that more in other episodes. So, and he comes down and he confronts Cain and he's like, where's your brother? And this is the famous, like, am I my brother's keeper? And I swear, as a sibling, an older sibling, I have wondered forever, am I supposed to be my sister's keeper? Like, is that a bad thing to say? Because it's Cain, and Cain's a bad character. And I'm all wound up in this narrative, so much so that I didn't even know when my student came to talk to me that the entire rest of this passage is God talking to Cain. And what God does for Cain there is, I don't even know if I have words. Can you put it into words for me?
Cain, at this point in the world the Bible presents to us, there is Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. He is a quarter of the population.
And he's just killed a quarter of the population.
And he is just killed a quarter of the population. There is no one more despicable than Cain. And he's done it out of some amount of jealousy, whatever, bad motives, right? And God
liked him better?
And God, in the rest of the story, he calls Cain on it, but then he is for Cain's prosperity.
Protects Cain. He
protects him, he provides for him, and he listens to him.
Without undermining the death of Abel.
Without.
This is the place where he's like, no, if man
draws
sheds
hard lines.
Someone else's blood, they should die.
Yeah.
And then he doesn't kill Cain.
No.
And he listens, like you said, he listens to him. He protects him. He puts a mark on him to be protected wherever, am I right?
Claims him, yeah.
Hold on, I got to make sure that's not
he marks
for the
him
next
so
one.
that, anyone who would.
Which begs the question, where's the everybody
I
else's?
know, we can talk about that too later. That's all fun stuff to talk about.
All of these are fun. Like, why animals and not crops? Why Cain or Abel and not Cain? Why? They're all fun questions, and they all have to be asked for us to understand the narrative better. But they're at the end of the day, for me, they're empty questions. Empties feel strong, but they really don't change my life much. One, because I don't really find an answer for them, and two, they don't affect me. But when I watch God show up to Cain, when I actually look, because I'm asking the right questions, show up to Cain, this most despicable of men, who just killed his brother over nothing.
His innocent, righteous, blameless brother.
And handle him, listen to him, protect him, still declare Abel's life absolutely valid and in need of vindication, and yet responds with grace. I don't even feel comfortable saying grace is the right way to respond.
Yeah. God uniquely throughout all of Scripture, one of my favorite things to see God do that just blows my mind and sometimes leaves me speechless is God's ability to be both perfect justice and mercy in the same situation. Not exactly the same. Cain had severe consequences, and also God didn't disown him. He just has this ability to do what we as humans try to do. We try to do it with laws. We try to do it with legislation.
I can't even
we
do
try
it
to
with
do
toddlers.
It in our we tried to do it with rules and gentle parenting and all of these things. And they're all our approximations of this perfect image of God's justice and mercy, neither of which get in the way of the other.
And I missed all of that. Until I had a student ask me, don't we read this the way we read every other text? And I'm like, of course it is. Of course it is.
Yeah.
Except why Abel? Like I'm still.
Yeah.
And I missed it. So there's still unanswered questions. This idea that the character of God as he's revealing himself to his people through every genre, every pericope. It's a big word so that we don't have to use the word story, because someone might think that story means it's not true. And a lot of us believe this stuff is actually
We're going to say story.
We're going to say
get
story.
Ready for
but
it.
Yes. All of these things. Every single time that's what he's handing the people is, I want to be known by you. I want to be known by you. And ultimately, we'll see that the promise that he gives all through Scripture, I think it's the most beautiful part of Scripture, is not only that I want to be known by you, but I want to be with you. I want you to be with me. I want to come to you, and I want you to be with me. And again, I just said this already, but you'll hear it 1,000 more times. This is the great mystery of Scripture to me. That God wants to show his power through redemption. Cool. Go ahead, save us. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, but find a New Testament scholar to
I've been with me.
Chat about that.
And I don't want to be with me all the time. And there's very few people I want to be with all the time. And for God to, have that be the thing that drives this entire text, I think is absolutely beautiful. So
it is.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Next time.